So in this video I'm going to be drawing black wavy fur on the dark grey Clairefontaine pastel mat. I'm going to be using the black polychromos, the dark indigo, the warm grey 2, a Pablo cocoa, a polychromos Payne's grey, Pablo light grey and the Caran d'Ache Museum aquarelle white. So to make a start, I'm using a black polychromos and I am just plotting in the darkest areas that I can see, so just rough shapes of the shadows that I can see within the photograph. There's no detail particularly. I'm following the direction of the hair where I can, and I'm literally just sort of, you know, plotting these dark areas. Doesn't necessarily have to follow the photograph exactly. I then start with a white Pablo. This is a Caran d'Ache Pablo, and I just come in over the top of the black and put in some of the highlights that I can see from the photograph. Again, it doesn't have to be 100% accurate. Then I've got the Payne's grey, polychromos Payne's grey, and I start to then build in the rest of the bits in between, so almost like the mid-tones, if you like, always following the direction of the hair, and just sort of popping in those bits that are missing. I can kind of darken up the darker areas if I need to do. Back to the black again and really start to darken up the darkest areas. What you have to remember when you're drawing a piece like this, or when you're drawing fur or a portrait or anything, especially on the pastel mat, is that it does look terrible for a little while. And I think if you understand that and you have that expectation, then you don't feel like everything's going wrong and it's not working. So I'm incorporating the dark indigo in there as well. And that's just to give me sort of like darker darks, if you like. This particular photo that I've used has got some really warm areas up at the top, so I decided to use a Pablo cocoa just to help with that sort of warmer tone. The cocoa's, it's like it's like a cocoa brown. It's a really nice colour. The other thing as well is, with it being a Pablo, it's quite soft, so it tends to smooth out the pencil on the pastel mat, which is, you know, is a really good thing, because pastel mat can be a little bit grainy. So building up the darks there, and then coming in again, and this is kind of where it starts to really take shape. So I'm coming in and I'm actually adding some really quite dense highlights in here now. So we're starting to get a feel of the fur. We're starting to get some of those really light highlights in there. It's still looking a little bit iffy in places, but you know, it's getting there. We then come back in and start to really intensify those darker areas. This is the black polychromos that I'm using at the moment. Always relatively light pressure that I'm using all the way through in these different layers. If I've got a really dark area, I might press a little bit harder. Always following the direction of the fur. That's one of the main things I think to remember when you're drawing something like this, is to really take note of the direction of the hair, because it makes a massive difference. Starting now to be able to put in some of the smaller details. I find when I'm drawing hair like this, the more shapes I can create in the piece, the more I can then create details later on. And shapes can be added with the different colours. Obviously I've managed to add quite a few colours, or quite a few shapes in with the lighter light grey Pablo, and then I can incorporate into those shapes the shadows, some of the mid-tones, and leave some of the highlight areas in there. I don't tend to use a really sharp pencil for my fur drawings. And there's a couple of reasons behind that. One is that a really sharp pencil can actually mark the pastel mat. It can leave a mark and then it's difficult to kind of draw over the top of it. And the other reason is actually with a blunter end to your pencil, you can get more pigment down on the paper and it actually comes out a little bit softer. So those are two reasons why I don't tend to keep a really sharp point on my pencils. You can start to see here actually how it's really taking shape now. You can see those curls starting to appear. You know, the highlights that I put in along the way, they're staying, but we're starting to you know, really come in and add more darks, really start to define those curls and starting to get a real depth into this fur, so that by the end of it, hopefully we'll start to be able to almost feel that it's real fur. One of the things that I think really makes the fur look real is to add these little tiny stray hairs relatively early on. I think it helps you as the artist because it makes things seem a little bit more real. It also adds more opportunity for creating shapes. So I'm using very light pressure. I use the light grey Pablo, and then this pencil here that I'm using is the Museum Aquarelle White. This is a fabulous pencil to draw light over dark, and you can see how I'm just adding in little stray hairs. I might be using a little bit extra pressure to create whiter areas, and I'm just sort of adding these little stray hairs all over the piece, and it's starting to look much more real now. Creating those little shapes in and out of and around the curls is really going to help me in the next stage where I start to darken everything up, and this is where it starts to look like real fur. You're starting to add real depth in here, you know, and hopefully it will look like you can actually reach in and kind of touch the fur and feel its depth. So feel that you've got fur, you know, that's close to the skin, building up. You've got the gorgeous shine in the fur there, and it's starting to look quite nice from those horrible first layers where, you know, it really does look pretty grim, to now looking really, you know, quite fur-like, you know, and that's why you have to have that expectation at the beginning, knowing that those initial marks that you put down, you were going in the right direction, you know, because it's so easy to give up when something's looking not very good. So really starting to define these curls now. You may leave quite a few of the highlights in. You might decide that some of the highlights you need to darken. This one in particular, you know, it needs darkening up. The other thing as well is you'll see that actually this isn't a complete replica of the photograph. You know, I've kind of gone off on a tangent in certain places, and actually that it's not a problem for me. You know, I'm wanting to draw fur. I'm wanting to get the feeling of the dog's fur, the dog's hair. I'm not looking to copy the photograph exactly. I'm looking for the look and feel of the photo and the dog's hair rather than it being a complete copy of the photograph. So I'm not that bothered if, you know, I've added an extra curl in here or there, or I've missed one out. It's not, you know, as long as I've got the look and the feel of the hair, then that's okay for me. So it's all in the layers. There aren't hundreds of layers in this piece at all by any means, and it's a lot of it is about your pencil choices. So Pastel Mat is renowned for being a paper that you can add a lot of layers into, which is fantastic. But if you don't want to add a lot of layers, you don't need to. And actually choosing different pencils to help you, so choosing the Pablos over the top of the polychromos will really help with smoothing. The way that you add your colours, so the light over the top of the dark, that's going to really really help with the graininess and having things really nice and smooth. And also using blunter pencils, I think, really helps too. So here again, using the Caran d'Ache Museum Aquarelle, just adding in some of those final little stray hairs. It really does make things look, you know, I think it makes it look really realistic. And the beauty of the pastel mat is that you can get the light over dark, and it does work incredibly well. The reason I chose the dark grey pastel mat was purely because it's a dark fur, and it's going to help me because it's kind of my mid-tones, it's kind of halfway there. So choosing a paper colour to really help give me a head start, I think is always a good idea. So if I was drawing white fur, I would choose white paper to draw on rather than the dark grey, because I'm halfway there with the white paper, so hence the dark grey with the black fur. So brightening up certain areas, you know, bringing in sort of some more little highlighty bits just to kind of help pull those hairs right to the foreground, and little, you know, finishing off little areas, and we get a really nice nice piece of fur. Actually, I'm really very pleased with how it's turned out.